Imagine buying a cheap bus ticket, driving a car, running a factory, or ordering a product online. The price you see looks simple. It tells you what the seller wants and what you are willing to pay. But that price may leave something important out. Smoke in the air, chemicals in a river, traffic noise, congestion, or even a benefit like a well-kept garden that makes a whole street nicer can affect people who never agreed to the transaction. In economics, that missing effect is called an externality. It is external because it falls outside the direct buyer and seller relationship. The market records the private cost and private benefit, but not always the full social cost or social benefit. That gap is why externalities matter so much. They reveal that markets can be powerful at coordinating decisions, yet still incomplete when some consequences are not priced. An externality is a cost or benefit imposed on a third party who is not directly involved in an economic activity. The key idea is not simply that an action has consequences. Almost every action has consequences. What makes an externality economically important is that the affected person is not compensated for a harm or does not pay for a benefit. If a factory sells cloth, the buyer pays for the cloth and the factory receives revenue. But if the same factory pollutes a nearby river, downstream households may face dirtier water, worse health, or higher treatment costs. Those households are part of the real story, but they are not part of the market transaction. The price of the cloth may look efficient between buyer and seller, while society as a whole is absorbing extra damage that never appears on the invoice. The most familiar type is a negative externality. This happens when an activity creates a cost for others. Air pollution from motor vehicles is a classic example. Drivers pay for fuel, insurance, repairs, and the vehicle itself. But the broader public may bear costs from polluted air, respiratory illness, greenhouse gas emissions, road noise, and congestion. The driver does not usually pay each person affected by the exhaust. Because that damage is not fully included in the private price of driving, people may drive more than they would if the full social cost were visible. The same logic applies to water pollution from mills and factories. The producer may count labor, machinery, and raw materials as costs, but polluted water can reduce quality of life and impose cleanup costs on people who never bought the product. Externalities can also be positive. A positive externality occurs when an activity creates a benefit for others who do not pay for it. Education is a common example. A student gains skills and earning power, but society may also gain from lower crime, better civic participation, more innovation, and a more capable workforce. Vaccination can also create benefits beyond the vaccinated person by reducing disease transmission. Even a homeowner who maintains an attractive garden can slightly raise the pleasantness and value of a neighborhood. In each case, the person making the decision receives some benefit, but not necessarily the entire benefit created for society. If people cannot capture enough of the value they generate, they may do too little of the beneficial activity from society's point of view. The concept became important in economic thought through Alfred Marshall in the 1890s and later through Arthur Pigou in the 1920s. Marshall helped develop the language of costs and benefits surrounding production, including effects that reach beyond individual firms. Pigou made the problem especially influential by showing how private decisions could diverge from social welfare. His work asked a direct question: if the private market price does not include the damage caused to others, how can society correct that gap? Pigou's answer was to make the decision-maker face the marginal external cost. In simpler terms, if each extra unit of pollution causes extra social damage, the polluter should face a charge equal to that damage. That idea became known as a Pigouvian tax. To understand why externalities are considered market failures, consider how a competitive market normally works. Buyers compare prices with their private benefits. Sellers compare prices with their private costs. When those private signals reflect all relevant costs and benefits, the market can allocate resources efficiently. But with an externality, the private signal is incomplete. A factory may produce where its private cost equals the market price, but if each unit also damages the river, the true social cost is higher. The result is overproduction of the polluting good. In technical terms, the competitive equilibrium may fail to be Pareto optimal, meaning resources could be reallocated in a way that makes at least someone better off without making others worse off, once compensation and the full social effects are considered. A useful way to visualize the problem is to separate private cost from social cost. Private cost is what the decision-maker directly pays. Social cost includes private cost plus the external damage imposed on everyone else. When a negative externality exists, social cost is above private cost. That means the market price is too low relative to the real cost to society. Low prices encourage more consumption or production than is socially efficient. For positive externalities, the opposite can happen. Private benefit may be lower than social benefit, so the market produces too little of something valuable. This is why externalities are not just moral complaints about unfairness. They are also information problems. The price system is communicating a distorted message because an important part of reality is missing from the price. Governments and institutions often try to solve externalities by internalizing them. To internalize an externality means to bring the external cost or benefit into the decision itself. With pollution, one common method is a tax on the activity causing the damage. If burning a certain fuel creates measurable harm, a tax can make the user pay closer to the full social cost. Once that cost is included, consumers and producers have an incentive to reduce the activity, switch technologies, or innovate. The goal is not always to eliminate the activity completely. Some pollution reduction may be cheap and worthwhile, while reducing the last tiny amount may be extremely expensive. The economic goal is to reduce the externality to an efficient level, where the cost of further reduction would exceed the benefit. Pigouvian taxes sound clean in theory, but they are difficult in practice. Regulators need information about the size of the external damage, who is affected, how damage changes with each additional unit, and whether people or firms can adapt. Setting the tax too low leaves too much harmful activity. Setting it too high can suppress useful production more than necessary. Measuring harms like health effects, ecosystem damage, climate impacts, or long-term water contamination is complex. The damage may vary by location and time. A factory upstream of a drinking water source may impose more harm than the same factory somewhere else. Because of these information problems, public policy often uses imperfect estimates, political compromise, and practical enforcement tools rather than a perfectly calculated textbook tax. Another response is regulation. Instead of charging a price for the externality, government may set rules, emission limits, safety standards, technology requirements, zoning restrictions, or outright bans. Regulation can be useful when damage is severe, difficult to price, or morally unacceptable above a certain threshold. For example, if a chemical is extremely toxic, society may not want firms merely to pay a fee for releasing it. Regulation can also be easier to explain and enforce in some cases. But regulation has trade-offs. It may be less flexible than a tax, because every firm faces the same rule even if some could reduce harm more cheaply than others. The debate between taxing and regulating externalities is really a debate about information, incentives, enforcement, fairness, and political feasibility. Externalities are also shaped by institutions, property rights, and legal responsibility. If harmed parties can clearly identify who caused damage and can negotiate or sue effectively, some externalities may be addressed without broad regulation. But real life often makes that difficult. Air pollution may come from thousands of sources. Climate change involves billions of emitters and people affected across generations. Water pollution may be hard to trace precisely. Legal structures can also influence behavior. For example, limited liability protects investors from being personally responsible for many corporate harms beyond their investment. That can encourage investment and entrepreneurship, but critics argue it may also reduce incentives to fully prevent damage when the corporation's activities impose costs on others. Externalities therefore sit at the intersection of markets, law, and institutional design. The deeper lesson of externalities is that prices are not automatically truth. They are signals created by rules, rights, information, and bargaining power. When the consequences of an action spill over onto uninvolved people, the market price may become too low, too high, or incomplete. Negative externalities like pollution can lead society to consume too much of harmful activities because the damage is hidden. Positive externalities like education or vaccination can lead society to invest too little because the wider benefits are not fully rewarded. Tools like Pigouvian taxes, regulation, liability rules, subsidies, and better property rights all try to repair the signal. Externalities matter because they show why economic efficiency is not just about voluntary exchange. It is about whether the full consequences of that exchange are counted. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.